Rosenthal's brain. Were you the boy's doctor?
No, I know Jeff through my son, Tony. They were only friends for a couple of months, but they were very close.
Oh, come on in. Dr. Quincy, Dr. Arthur Ciotti.
How do you do, sir?
How do you do? Gentlemen? Joe, if you weren't the boy's doctor, I'm not sure why you're here.
I have to know about the boy's brain. What condition is it in?
Well, it wasn't directly damaged in the fall. Why?
You examined it?
Sure.
Just a minute. Dr. Ciotti, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to explain in more detail exactly what this is all about.
Yes, of course. I'm sorry. 11 years ago, when my son was 7 years old, he started getting tics. Facial grimaces, head shaking, that sort of thing. Well, I was a GP at the time, and I'd seen enough transient tics in children, so Marie and I, my wife was alive then, we weren't particularly worried. But then the tics became more intense, and vocalizations started. That's when we started seeing specialists. I don't know if you gentlemen have any children, but it's a terrible thing for a doctor not to know what's wrong with his own son. But no one knew. Not for 5 years did we know. It turned out to be Tourette syndrome.
Tourette's, of course.
What kind of symptoms are we talking about?
Chronic multiple tics. They wax and wane, they change location, and they're always accompanied by involuntary vocalizations. Sounds, throat clearing, puckering.
Foul language.
That's right. That's present in about half of Tourette victims. With my son Tony, it's just noises. Anyway, a special ed teacher introduced Jeff to my son, and I watched him closely for a couple of months. It was definitely Tourette syndrome.
And you want to examine his brain?
It's a rare opportunity. Ever since I found out about my son's problem, I've devoted my professional life to trying to find a cure. Right now, I'm doing research for lesser Pharmaceuticals. But you see, there are no animal models for Tourette research. That's why having tissue from a victim would be invaluable.
As far as organ donations are concerned, there's not much we can do without the parents' consent.
Now, I have to invite the Rosenthals out to my lab. I want them to see a film of Tourette patients. It's important that they understand the value that their gift could have.
Okay, maybe. But I still can't believe Jeff's profanity was something physical.
But you have to understand it's a breakdown of the inhibition system. Jeff could no more control what he said than he could control his movements. And what he was most afraid of blurting out, offensive language, was just what he could control the least.
All we wanted was for Jeffrey to get better. What more could we do? We went to professionals, teachers, and doctors. Just lost my only child, and he's telling me he was some kind of a medical freak.
Mrs. Rosenthal, please. I have some idea of the hell that you're talking about. I know how cruel people can be to a child who is not like the rest, who can't keep still, who's terrified of quiet places because he knows they won't be quiet once he's there. I know about the looks, the name-calling, the nights you hear him cry himself to sleep. I'm just as angry as you are, and most of the time I feel just as helpless. But you see, if we're going to do anything about it, I need your help. And so does that young man you just saw.
Jeffrey would have wanted it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know, when I see a film like this, I thank God that scientists of your caliber are working on an answer.
Except we're the only drug company that'll touch it. And even my budget's been cut to the bone.
I don't understand it. Why aren't they interested?
Simple economics. Say there are, 100,000 Tourette victims in the country. Oh, with the millions of dollars that it takes to develop a new drug and the limited patent on it, if you do, the manufacturers feel that they can't even recover their investment, let alone turn a profit.
So your company's still funding you?
They're just hoping I'll come up with a more lucrative cure. I don't kid myself, Dr. Quincy. There are no angels of mercy in my boardroom.
So if you've got a disease that happens to have a low incidence, don't count on the pharmaceutical companies for any help.
Like I said, I'm the exception.
You think of the fortunes that some of them make.
That's why they call them orphan drugs. The miracles, the cures for rare diseases that no one wants to adopt.
Well, isn't there a bill before Congress that's supposed to deal with all this?
The orphan drug bill. It's still being considered. My son is going to testify. I'd love for you to meet him.
I'm looking forward to it. Is there hope that it will still pass?
Well, there are only 10 days left in this Congress, and my friends in Washington tell me that a lame duck lays no eggs. But if they don't act quickly, that bill will die. And so will a lot of people's hopes.
Choose.
Oh, by all means, send them. It may be the last important research I do. Unless I can find some other funding.
They give you a reason?
Oh, several. All of them preceded by dollar signs.
Listen, your company president, isn't his name Prager?
Yes, have you met him?
Not in person. But a few years back, one of their drugs was accused of causing a coronary in a young woman.
I seem to remember that. It went to court, didn't it?
That's right. My autopsy proved it was a congenital defect, not the drug. He told me then he owed me one. Maybe it's time to pick up the IOU. I'll talk to you later. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Dr. Quincy. I still shudder to think where we'd be if you hadn't done your job so expertly.
Thank you. I know another scientist who's just as professional.
Chiati.
Yep.
Arthur's a good man, crack researcher. Nobody wanted to lose him, but it was his choice. Maybe you could still talk some sense into him.
I'm not here to arbitrate, sir, just to learn. Thank you.
Arthur said you were interested in the Tourette's research.
Well, I'm more interested in why it ended.
It was a management decision. Sounds terribly cold, but it would have been fiscally irresponsible to let it go on. Years ago, pharmaceutical houses brought out a lot more what they called service or prestige drugs, sold them at a loss, but at a tolerable loss. We can't afford that anymore. Have you any inkling of what it costs to bring a new drug into the marketplace?
So a disease like Tourette's syndrome can be blue-penciled by an accountant.
Unfortunately, yes. It happens.
But where's the dividing line, sir?
What?
The dividing line. Who gets help and who doesn't? How many victims are enough? How many cries before they're heard? 1 million? 2 million?
Dr. Quincy, I don't like the situation any more than you or Dr. Chiati. But we simply can't afford these
Orphan drugs?
I find that term a little loaded.
But it is accurate, isn't it? Humane consideration doesn't come up when you decide which areas to pursue.
There are certain things that are better handled by other institutions. Medical schools, research centers.
But almost every major breakthrough drug in the last 20 years has been developed through your industry.
Well, what would you have us do? Make the payroll with IOUs?
No, of course not, but isn't there a way you can produce the drug with what you call a tolerable loss?
Possibly. if there weren't for two things standing in the way, Congress and the FDA. I think if you look a little further, you'll find that our shackles were forged in Washington, and we didn't invent the regulations. We just have to run fast enough to keep ahead of them.
Oh, maybe I am here to arbitrate. What if they met you halfway, cut the red tape, help cover your costs?
Oh, if that happened, sure. We'd probably reevaluate involvement with the service drugs.
Thank you for your time, sir.
You're welcome. Dr. Quincy, you're dreaming.
You're not the first one to ever accuse me of that. This whole area, and the more I find out, the more disheartened I become.
In some ways, I agree with you. Coffee?
Oh, thank you. Mrs. Davis, if you'll forgive me, your agency seems to be a big part of this problem. Dr. Ciotti's Tourette research ended because his pharmaceutical company felt they couldn't absorb the cost of complying with the FDA's regulations.
Food and Drug does have the strictest drug development standards in the world, and I'm not about to apologize for it. You remember the thalidomide tragedies of the early 60s,
Yeah.
when Congress decided to make sure it never happened again? Well, the standards are rough, but our mandate is to protect the health and safety of the public.
Well, nobody could argue against exhaustive testing if the drug is going to be widely used. But shouldn't there be another standard for a small patient population like Tourette's?
That's a judgment Congress will have to make.
But who's going to bother with the orphans? And it's not just Tourette's. It's Huntington's disease and myasthenia gravis and sickle cell anemia and literally dozens of low-incidence diseases and millions of people. I mean millions. So what do we tell them? Hey, why don't you trade in what you have for a more common affliction? Or do we drown them?
Dr. Quincy, the FDA isn't blind to this problem. We do everything we can to encourage the development of these drugs. But we can't develop them. It has to happen in the private sector. But just last year, a major drug company got approval for a drug that treats a rare tumor.
One. Miss Davis. One. How many are totally ignored by the best minds and the best facilities in pharmacology?
Obviously, quite a few. Look, if we wanted to expedite the approval process, selectively I mean, we'd have to have Congress behind us, and the drug companies too. We can't approve a drug that's not submitted.
Okay, tell me this. Would the FDA budge if Congress did? If they passed the orphan drug bill?
Off the record, Doctor? I think the agency would do their part if everyone else did.
Thank you, Miss Davis.
But Dr. Quincy, that's a big if.
I'll give you a bigger if. What's going to happen to these poor people if nobody does anything about this problem?
Bill, Dr. Quincy. It's not as if I'm not sympathetic. It's just that, well, I'm not sure what the whole thing is. Just a lot of window dressing.
Believe me, Congressman, I wouldn't have come all the way up here to talk to you about window dressing or theories. I have some concrete proposals from the best authorities I could find.
I'd still like to know how the drug companies are going to break even on a drug with only 100,000 customers.
By everybody pitching in, carrying their share of the burden, including you lawmakers. You can start with tax incentives and loan guarantees, help subsidize the enormous cost of clinical testing, cover their liability insurance. And if they make a profit on the drug, they pay the government back. That way, everybody's a winner. And if the patent laws don't run long enough, extend them. Congress can do that.
And that'll balance their books?
No. Not by itself, no. The FDA has to help. There is no reason why an orphan drug has to cost $50 million. Now, they should do something about that.
All right, what about the pharmaceutical industry?
Like I said, everybody has to carry their load.
Oh, If I could only be sure we could pay for this brave new world of yours.
We pay now, and we're getting ourselves a bargain. Right now, we are paying for a lifetime of disability for a Tourette victim. Now, you multiply that by 100,000, and that by a score of orphan diseases, and you tell me what we can afford and what we can't afford.
You realize, of course, that this session of Congress is almost over. I mean, time is running out.
Well, maybe we can beat that clock, if we don't run out.
That's the haloperidol, isn't it?
I'll be okay once I get up there concentrated.
I better go see when they want you. You all right?
I feel like I just swallowed a butterfly.
You all right?
I feel like I just swallowed a butterfly collection.
Well, you're gonna be fine.
Mr. Tony Ciani, please.
Thanks. I made some notes, but in the interest of trying to avoid reading my own handwriting, I'll try to wing it. I've got my problems, but the lack of spontaneity has never been one of them. Tourette syndrome is one of my problems, and it's a doozy. The symptoms started when I was about 7, and unless I'm asleep or concentrating at the piano or other passions, I get tics, and my speech comes complete with sound effects. I could get into the physical symptoms. They're pretty gruesome. But the mental anguish, that's the worst part. Being the object of laughter, and sometimes even hate. Being told by your teachers to shut up when there's nothing you'd rather do, but you can't. But even that's not the worst part. The worst part is that nobody believes that you've even got a disease. You hear things like, oh, Tony, he just wants attention. Or if I had a kid like him, I could straighten him out with a few swift kicks. You get so you almost envy people in wheelchairs because at least nobody questions their handicap. Maybe I should have stuck with my notes. Because I really didn't come here to talk about myself. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm not sure I realized it until recently, but I've got the world by the tail compared to a lot of people. I have a girlfriend who appreciates my sense of humor. I have a father who loves me. And some pretty great friends. I'm thinking about the other victims. Not just of Tourette's, but anyone who is unlucky enough to have a disease that never made it to the top 40. I'm thinking about a girl my age with myoclonus. It's another movement disorder. She gets her medication from a veterinary supply house. Chemical that isn't even pharmaceutically pure. Because no drug company wants an Edsel. And here we're talking about an orphan drug that exists. What chance does a Wilson's or a Tay-Sachs disease have when all the drug companies are tripping over each other, trying to come up with a better diet pill or a better sleeping pill? The truth is that the only real chance of research money going to these diseases is if you, the Congress, make the orphan drug bill a reality. If you don't act, please think of all the people you'll be writing off. I'm thinking of my friend, Jeff Rosenthal. He had Tourette's too. He was a real movie nut. He loved it all. Laurel and Hardy, Bogey, Fritz Lang. But half the time he'd get thrown out of the theater or chased out. The last time it happened, he died running away. How come he had to run?
It was a tough...
How come he had to run? Why couldn't someone say, hey, stop, take it easy. You have as much right to be here as the rest of us. We won't ignore you. You're not going to be an orphan forever. Thanks. I guess I'm done.